Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the Wednesday, January 14th, 2015 episode of Free Webinar Wednesdays. This is Eric Cook, and I'm with WSI Internet Consulting, where we work with businesses and organizations on helping them better understand and leverage the power of the Internet as a strategic business tool. You can learn more about me and WSI online at www.poweredbywsi.com. With me this week is my good friend and Free Webinar Wednesday partner, Mr. Jeff Simpkins. Jeff, say hello to everybody out there in Free Webinar Wednesday world.
Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you happen to be listening in from. This is Jeff Simpkins. I'm with Community Bank Consulting, Inc., and you can learn more about me and Community Bank Consulting, Inc. online at www.communitybankconsulting.com. So, Eric,
don't forget good evening. Don't forget good evening, because we do have some UK and European friends that'll pop in every once in a while, so we don't want to leave you guys out.
Good evening this evening where you are. I noticed you got the year right this week on the post.
I did. Thank you for pointing that out. Absolutely. I won't say that I typed it correctly the first time, but I did make sure to double check that before I actually hit the publish button. So for those of you that weren't on last week's show, I confessed I have a really hard time of typing 2015, and I keep typing 2105. So I've added an extra 100 years or so to the date, the year, and I keep wanting to accelerate. So it's a struggle that I'm going to have to fight all year long, because my fingers just want to go right to 21 instead of 20. So we'll see if we can get that fixed. So, well, I think we've got a lot of ideas and discussion, I think, for today, because Jeff, you and I attend a lot of conferences, both in our days as bankers and service providers and now as consultants. So rather than me lament about how freaking cold it is up here in Michigan and you get to brag about how nice it is down there in North Carolina, let's go ahead and we'll just jump right into it. I'll give a little housekeeping before we get started. As a reminder, today's show and all shows for Free Webinar Wednesdays are recorded, and we encourage you to stop back to freewebinarwednesdays.com and check out this and other shows. And if you're listening to us on a recording, thanks for stopping back and listening to it. We do like to get questions and interactivity during the session. So if you have a comment or a question that you'd like to ask, please feel free to use the chat feature in your control panel, which is probably located to the right-hand side of your screen. Type that in. Jeff and I will monitor those, and we'll ask your question for you when we have a little bit of a break in the action. So with that,
Eric,
I'm going to – yes.
I see a couple people are dialed in on the phone. Just a reminder, the primary number is a Canadian phone number. If you do not mean to be calling Canada, you may want to take a moment and look at the telephone number list and choose a number in the U.S. or the country you choose to be dialing into.
There you go. Good catch. We miss that every once in a while. WSI being a Canadian-born company, our master account is run through our corporate office, and we've had the unfortunate circumstance with a few of our attendees attending Free Webinar Wednesdays getting a $20, $30, $40 phone bill for unexpected telephone charges. So, and I know, Jeff, you were burnt by that one, so you're probably a little bit more sensitive to that. So, good call there. Well, I have worked my little GoToWebinar magic, and I can see Eric is in the process of prepping his desktop. So while he gets the presentation ready to play, I'm going to give just a brief intro, and then I'll let him talk a little bit. And yes, we do have two Erics on the webinar today, so we'll have to be okay with that. But Eric Francois is with a company by the name of Topi, and they are one of WSI's newest partners. And we had the opportunity to actually use their conference app at our Boca conference this year, our global convention down in Florida this past September. And the thing that I think Jeff and I can attest to is a lot of the events that we're going to now are providing conference apps to share information, to facilitate engagement, download information. A lot of people are attending conferences now on iPads, and they can pull the slides right down and take notes. And so Topi is in that space. I think they have a rather unique approach to it, and we'll ask Eric to maybe share a little bit about the Topi product towards the end. But today, Eric Francois is going to be sharing some ideas and suggestions on ways to get the most out of your next conference, even if it doesn't necessarily have an app associated with it, but how you can leverage technology going up to a conference, during the conference, and even after the conference, and build our network of connections. So hopefully I did that a little bit of justice, Eric. I will also disclose that we have our first app is actually going right now with the Michigan Brewers Guild. They're having their winter conference, which unfortunately I can't be at, but it looks like they're having an awful lot of fun up in northern Michigan at Boyne at the ski resort, and they're really loving the app, and I want to make sure to share that with you, Eric, and everybody else, because it's a pretty simple app, and we pulled that together very, very quickly, and it worked slick as a charm. So it was pretty cool. So with that out of the way, Eric, welcome to Free Webinar Wednesdays. Thanks for joining us this morning, afternoon, or evening. And the floor is yours, my friend. We can see your screen.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that introduction, the kind words, and I'm excited about being on. I thank you, you and Jeff, for inviting me and sharing some thoughts here around networking. Interesting topic. I think a topic we could probably spend a lot of hours on, given how deep it is. But certainly, I think we'll share some of my personal views and experience attending a lot of events in my prior life. And since we share an industry in the banking world, I think we've all been through those conferences and seminars and summits that we had to go to. And then, of course, being now in the event tech, I think I have somewhat of a unique perspective on what people do, what works, what doesn't work. And so what I'll share today is really around this, and not just about technology. I also decided to insert some just advice or maybe some obvious points about things to do and not do at events in terms of expanding your network, talking to people, breaking the ice, and all those things that we'll talk about today. And so this is very much geared towards people that go to small events, small gatherings, social by nature, all the way up to the big trade show, very large, where you get lost looking for the bathroom and that type of thing. So it's a broad spectrum of coverage here in today's presentations. So first, before we get started, and please, as Eric said, jump in, ask questions. I'd love to keep this active and or reactive and live, and that will make it for much more fun and engaging. So what is networking? I thought it would be interesting to pull an actual definition of it, because we all talk about networking, and I think networking means a lot of things to a lot of different people, frankly. The way I like this definition, and I'll let you read it on my screen here. I won't repeat it, but a couple of words jumped out to me, exchange, productive relationships, because I think a lot of people, when they think about networking, they think it's a one-way thing. It's like, I'm collecting business cards, I'm going to meet as many people as I can, but I think we lose a little bit the exchange aspect. What is that other person getting from me, or what is the the dual benefits that we all get in that. And so networking could be very simply, connecting and being active with our existing network, I think, and friends and relationships that we have, colleagues, even family, frankly, sometimes. And I think, also what people understand about networking is that it's a lot about expanding your own network, finding new people, generate more business, find potential partners, find your next job, whatever the reason might be while you're networking. It's kind of in that spirit of expanding and growing, not necessarily using or leveraging your existing network, which I think, frankly, could be covered in that definition. And for today's presentation, we'll cover and talk more about the latter, which is more of the expansion of a network rather than, cultivating your own network and relationships, of course. But the exchange is important to me, and I'll come back to this during the presentation, because I want to really emphasize and stress that point. And I think a lot of the tools and techniques that I'll share here will touch on that. And so hopefully you'll see that through the webinar today. So let me just cover very briefly at high level, and the reason I do this is because I want to provide some context around the meeting industry and why we're still getting together despite all of the technologies that are at our disposal today. And we'll talk more about technology, of course, here, but stating the obvious, there's the virtual meetings, the social networks, and the mobile friendly, and all those things, but still, we get together. We physically, want to get together in a room, a conference room, a trade show, a convention center, anything that we find interesting. And the industry is going and doing very well. In fact, the industry, as you can see some statistics here on my screen, is a very, very large and actually still growing industry. 1.8 million meetings in the U.S. alone. That's about 5,000 a day, just to give you some context. And that's the U.S. alone. So if you include, of course, Europe and the rest of the world, I think we're in the very high numbers. And not surprisingly, a lot of those meetings are usually more corporate and business meetings, over 50% of them. So they're not just social gatherings of, a couple guys getting together over beer. They're actually proper, educational meetings of people learn and get together as an industry. There's usually a theme or a common, values that you share when you go to those meetings. And it's really, a lot of the energy and dollars that are spent around meeting today, very much around, hotels, catering, transportation, and getting there. So it's a lot of investments, not for the not just for the individuals going, but also for the organization sending their employees and their people going to those meetings. So very fascinating to watch that this industry is still thriving despite the added technologies, and that to me was something I was not. I didn't fully realize when I got into the Topi world, as we were starting to talk more to event planners and event organizers and agencies, the impact that the meeting industry has over business. Now let's talk briefly about virtual meetings, since we're about here in technology as well. One thing that I think is interesting here is I think it's a growing industry as well. I think there's a place for it. Frankly, I could see, in 10, 15 years, more and more meetings done this way, through like a webinar like today, or conference calls, or video conference calls. I mean, all sorts of tools that you can really collect, get and gather people together around a topic. I think the scale is an issue, frankly. As soon as you start, tapping into a much higher number, I think it's not the same experience for sure. Frankly, the other big topic that I think is all on our minds when we talk about virtual meetings and conference calls is that the distraction factor. People can do a lot of things while they're listening, and so the value of that meeting, is it really a true value, or is there like a very short time span of attention? Because we will answer emails, we will do other things during those virtual get-togethers, if you will, and I think that's a problem. And so I think there's a place, don't get me wrong, but not necessarily the same quality, definitely not the same experience. And let's face it, I think all of us here, I can speak for myself, and I think probably it sounds like Eric and Jeff share that as well. Meetings are actually fun. Going to conferences and events in general, broadly defined, if it's done the right way and if you're prepared, it's actually a fun time, because one is it's a change of pace from your normal environment. It is business, but there's still some people that you might know. It's a great way to reconnect with friends and former colleagues, for example. And so I think the impact of that physical get-together is one that the virtual industry and the virtual meetings will not replace, and that's probably that's probably good news, I think, in my view, frankly. Now, we've covered the market, it's big, we covered that we all go to events, we still get together. Now, in-person interactions are key, and I think, what we hear from the studies that we've read and also the analysis that have been done in the industry, there's two main reasons why we all go to events. One, and a very strong one, is networking, meeting new people. Very clear, there's not even a close second. The second is education and learning, of course, because, we all go there to meet our peers, to learn from sessions and listen to great presentations. But the number one critical element is to really meet new people and expand your network, as well as reconnecting with people you already know. And so that's always, a very, very interesting, point. So here's the natural flow, right? And I think I can probably speak for all of us here on this call today. I think we all relate to that, and if we don't, then maybe some people are more social and less shy than others. But for the most part, I think the experience is like this. We come in, we walk into a room. There's a lot of people around here, potentially, people we may know, people we don't. But for the most part, we don't know them. And it just kind of feels awkward. And I call this the fear of strangers. Frankly, it's a word and something I've used before. I'm not sure if it's exactly how people feel, but there's always this awkward moment of like, okay, here it starts, and I've got to get going, and I've got to start meeting people, and I've got to start doing my thing. And hopefully, as I said, and I'll show you in a few slides, if we're prepared, if we've actually done our homework, if we know the sessions we want to attend, if we know maybe the people we want to meet, a lot of those things will be made easier as the event goes on. But for the most part, there's this weird moment, this awkward feeling as you come in. Now, technology can be helpful, and that's, of course, the topic of today's conversations. We'll talk about how technology can help you before, of course, as you prepared for your events, and then also during. When you come in, we all carry our wonderful smartphones in our pockets and our tablets, and those are here to help you. They might not, always be helpful, and I think I'll draw a very clear distinction between what we can do as humans and what technology can bring, because I don't think technology is the answer to everything, but it can certainly be helpful to some extent. Now, the one thing I would say as the final thought on this slide is that, again, I'll speak for myself. I'm a heavy user of, the LinkedIn, the social networks, the Facebook and Twitter of the world. And usually when I meet someone or when I go to a meeting, I will try to connect and try to identify people. I will look at profiles on LinkedIn, see how I'm connected to them. It works on a very small scale, but as soon as I walk into an event, all the existing tools that I have at my disposal are basically not used at all and not helpful. And I'll show you that and why I think, especially event apps, of course, speaking from an event app provider, is one wonderful tool that can be made at your disposal, but it's more than that. The other thing I would say, going back to what we do when we come in, is that one is event organizers, and we talk to a lot of them. They are, our customers, and we traffic in this world, as I said. They're very aware of that feeling, very aware of that fear of the strangers, and so they're trying to put in place as many tools and as many games and icebreaker situations to make your life easier as an attendee. But for the most part, you have to assume that the bar is very low as you come in, and you're kind of on your own. Of course, if the organization has set up some things, I always encourage people to take advantage of them, because whether it's an event app, whether it's a game that will force you to team up with people, whether it's social activities that will really bring the social in us, and all those things are wonderful. But for the most part, you should know that it's a lot of work on yourself and independently of what the organization will do for you as you come into that event. So how do we get back to safety? And I call this back to safety because that's how I do and that's how I behave. And a lot of those thoughts are actually very personal for me, because I'm not a very social guy. I think by nature I've learned how to be, and I've learned how to walk the room and do my thing. But for the most part, I'm not going to be the type that goes around and talks to people that I don't know. So what do we do typically? Well, we look for familiar faces. That's rule number one. If you can find a friend, or if you can find someone from the industry or someone you've met before, that's a wonderful safety measure, because then you don't feel like you're by yourself. The one thing we hate most is really feel like we're left alone. We're here, nobody's talking to us, and you see groups of people that are getting together, and you're like, why am I by myself here? It's kind of this weird feeling, which is not very pleasant. The other one that we can do is be occupied. Look, for things to do, whether it's attending a session, whether it's going to the bar, grabbing a drink, whether it's going to the food, display, if there's food that, there. Anything that will really keep your mind and your physical activity going. That's another safety in my mind. And there's plenty of others, by the way, which you can throw in there as questions or as comments if you'd like. But those are kind of the 3 or 4 obvious ones for me that have worked. And then the one that, of course, and as this beautiful picture shows here of those young kids all together, gathered, but still on their phones, is that we will hide, and I say hide in quotation here, in our smartphones, because we think nobody else can see us. It's like putting your hand in the sand, but the reality is, of course, you're there, you're exposed, but at least you're looking down and you're looking at something else, whether it's to look at, the New York Times, or to do anything else that you might want to do, answer emails, but you feel better at that moment because you're not kind of, feeling exposed, if you will. That's probably the best way to describe it. So what are some of the solutions? Or, solutions is a strong word. I think it's just, tips or things that you might be considering as part of your networking and engagement when you go to those events. Again, assuming that your goals are similar to what I stated earlier, which is really to meet new people, reconnect with some friends and people you may know, and also learn and take full advantage of that event. Maximize this time that you're investing, you personally, from away from other work you could be doing, and also dollars behind, because of course everything costs. When you send people to an event, it's it's the hotel, it's the flight, it's the food, it's all the expenses around it. So it's not a small thing, and the return on investment must be quite high, I think, to justify that attendance. There's 3 main things that we looked into, and when we started Topi a couple of years ago, we actually spent a lot of time with psychologists to better understand the human behaviors around meeting new people. And it sounds pretty obvious, but we came out with 3 main elements, if you will, of that networking component. One is proximity. And of course, it seems, again, obvious to say, but it's who's here around me today physically, such that there's a physical presence. So this goes against, of course, the virtual component of it, which I will left aside for now for this discussion, but it's very much like I walk into a room and who's here today with me that I can talk to, grab a coffee, or do anything else. What is the something or the things that we share in common? What are the connectors among me, my profile, my interest, what I care about, and the others? It's really hard to identify, but you'll realize, and I'll go to this, that when you meet new people, that's one thing you look for. You look for that little thing that will get you going, not only to break the ice, but also to keep that conversation going. It's a lot easier to chat with someone if you share a passion for a sports team or sports or city, or anything you share will help you in that conversation. That's something in common is very, very essential. And then lastly is we feel much more comfortable and safe in a group setting at first. And it's much harder for us as human beings to go into a one-on-one discussion automatically and at first. We like the group setting, kind of get us comfortable in that conversation, and then potentially take that conversation private with one or two individuals if we like those people or if we connect. But it's the flow of things that is really what we learned from those discussions with psychologists that helped us not only design our product, but also make sure that we could identify and see how people like to do things. Because again, we're not going to change really human behaviors around engagement. We can improve and we can help, but we're not going to change the way we're programmed. And I think that's hopefully for the better. But there's ways we can improve on that. And so think about, I'd like to put you for a second and put you in a situation of a real life case study. Think for a moment how you meet new people today, how you meet new friends in your everyday lives. And I guarantee you that one, if not more, potentially all three of them, of those points are on your list. It's usually around friends of friends. They're throwing a party or they have a dinner. That's the group setting. That's the proximity. And then usually when you go there, you don't know necessarily everybody, but you start chatting, with people, and hopefully you find maybe one or two individuals that you like, and you have something in common. You went to the same university, or your passion, for soccer is so big that you can't stop talking about it. And that's usually that conversation that you'll take private. That is the person that in a week or two or so you'll reconnect privately through an email or a coffee to get going. And that's how you build a new dialogue and a new relationship. And so think of it that way. And it's very much and technology or events are very much on a bigger scale what we do in our everyday life. And I want to really stress that point because that's it's a natural instinct and natural behavior. So for this presentation, what I thought I would do is to structure some of the tools that are at your disposal to optimize this networking and really get a much better experience when you go to events, all types of events, by the way. There's also another way to look at it, which is what can I do as a human being? What can I do as a person without any technology to help me? And what are the tech solutions or the technology solutions I can use to help me and to get things better and more efficient, hopefully? That's another way to look at it. And then as I thought about this two angles, if you will, the human tech side of things, I thought to myself, well, it actually fits very nicely with the flow of an event. The flow of an event is very much the before, the during, and the after. Before, technology is not, the human side is not quite there yet because we're not physically at the event. This could be a few weeks to a few months before the event. You're preparing your event, you've registered, you're ready to go. The during is, of course, the obvious one, which we'll talk more about and we'll spend a lot of time on. And then the after is, how do I stay in touch? How do I follow up? What is my responsibility after all the people I've met to really do the right thing and do well to keep that dialogue going, whether for professional reasons or personal reasons. And so we'll talk about this as a flow here. So here we are, the first one, the three main steps of an event, the before, the start of the event. And here it's pretty simple, and I think most likely a lot of us or a lot of you on the phone here today do this. And many of those are not suggestions that you haven't heard or seen before, but it's about this dedication and this commitment of time and energy to do this in the right way. When we go to events and we invest this time, as I said before, I think it deserves a bit of preparation. And I do more and more of that myself when I go to events because I hate wasting my time when I go. And if I'm not prepared, I feel the difference. And I guarantee you it's a big difference. So prepare, and technology will be essential or key almost in that case, because we're not yet gathered. We're not together as human beings. And so what can we do, you know, to get this networking and this engagement going? So a couple things to do as you prepare and you do your homework. One is, of course, you know, make yourself known within the community. There might be ways for you to do that through social networks, through an app. Some event organizers will share the list of registered attendees sometimes. You can go through that list, you can start seeing. So it depends a little bit on the event, of course, but there's ways to identify or to make yourself known through your own social networks. For example, tell your community you're going to that event. Maybe you'll realize that others within that community will also go to that event, and why not coordinate that way? That will make your life easier. If you can, again, not knowing the events, of course, but some events will share profile information of people that are going, so you can identify you know, the people or the organizations that you want to connect with. That's part of your first step in networking, and that's what an app, for example, especially a networking focused app will do very well, is they'll, as soon as people start joining the community and the app itself, you will start identifying people you may care about, and the app may actually even suggest some recommendations that you might not think about. So that's another possibility. If you have, and that's probably the hardest one on the list, when you start identifying profiles, I always love, you know, it's like the old days when we were at school that we were always told, you know, be friends and find the cool kids. Well, that's a little bit the same for events. You know, find the influencers, find the people that matter and that know people, because if you start connecting with those, hopefully you'll be in a much better place as you come into the event. That's a very hard one to do, though, and so I don't mean to spend a ton of time on this, because I struggle doing it. And I think it's not an obvious one, but you can start seeing through the feed, you know, the Twitter feeds and the app itself, if there's an app again, that you'll quickly identify the people that are very chatty and very active in their communications. If you can, what I love to do before an event is actually meet people on the digital side, not in person, but meet them through a Twitter feed or an app or, you know, an email maybe, although very rare, but if there's an email communications around, that's also possible. You know, again, not a typical case, but make yourself known and start a conversation even before the event starts. This will allow you to potentially plan formal or informal meetings even before the event is started, such that when you come in, you know you already have those 4 people you're going to see for coffee for half hour, so you can start, you know, conversation. And put yourself in their shoes. They're also anxious to see you because they're accepting that discussion. So they're also, you're going on an equal footing in there as you go into that conversation. This is no longer an awkward moment or an awkward situation. You both agree to connect and chat at the event, which is a wonderful place to be in. Prepare your event, review the content, identify the sessions you like to attend. The sessions have an impact because, of course, you know, you can network within the session itself, and that's also something that people ignore to do sometimes. When you go to a session, you should assume that that person or people share that topic of interest, and so that's obviously a filter automatically created for you. You know that if you have thousands of people at an event, let's say to pick a random case, but you have 40 people attending that session, well, you know they care about this topic. And that's potentially an icebreaker, and that's also one that if you have any expertise or any knowledge in, or if you can learn about it, you will be thankful for that, because you will meet great people that share already that thing with you. So again, that awkward moment is less, and that conversation is easily going on at that time. And then the last thing I will do before switching a little bit more to the tech side of things is that I would always, and I do it for me as a person and also for me as a representative of my company, is I would always practice and revise my my pitch. You know, how do I introduce myself in 20 seconds or less? And you would be surprised how many people I meet at events that, you know, I say, and you know, what do you do? What is the company about? And it goes on, and they go in too many different directions, and I've lost attention at that moment. They've lost me basically after a minute, and that's a shame, because if you really practice your thing, if you know your topic, if you know your company, or even how you introduce yourself, frankly, as an individual, that will go a very long way in making a very productive first conversation and first impact as you meet someone. So let's talk briefly about some of the social media. You know, every single event, almost, I shouldn't say all, but a lot of events now have event hashtags, which you can plug in and connect that way. So this is a great tool for you to start, if you're users of Twitter, of course, you know, to start being active. That's one of them. You can use your LinkedIn to see how other people connect. So that's another tool, technology-wise, which you can see very quickly and easily how you're connected to people you might care about. Of course, we've talked already a little bit about the event apps. Now, let me just be clear on that point, and that's something I won't repeat through this presentation, but event apps are very, very different from one event to the next, and there's a very, very broad scale of things that those technologies can do for you, from very basic, you know, showing you an agenda in the app, and that's about it, all the way to pushing the envelope on the networking and helping you suggest people you might want to see and chat in the app and connect. And so again, I will use the term event apps or event networking apps as a generic term, but you should assume that they will be very different depending on the experience that you have and also on the app that they're using when you go to an event. So bear with me on that, because I can't, you know, a lot of things will be geared towards the networking aspect of the app, of course. But an app, you know, can be very, very helpful to see who's coming already. You can see all the content in the app. You don't even have to be on a laptop or a computer. You can see all this on your smartphone or your tablet. You can potentially in the app, if the functionality is there, you can actually connect and interact in the app way before the event started, publicly, like in the chat room format, or privately if you already connect with people or if you know them. It's a wonderful tool, and I think more and more people are using apps now at their events. In fact, there are a couple studies, just to put some statistics on the table here, but studies that say that about 80% of event planners say that us, their attendees, expect an event app, because it's so prominent now and people expect this. And frankly, you know, when you look at the statistics of mobile phones and the fact that 330 million phones or people have mobile phones in the US, I think, and 2/3 of them are smartphones. So it's definitely a push and pull aspect here, but we as attendees are demanding technology, and an app is front and center in that. And I think it's likely to continue even more, because, you know, there's still a very, very large percentage of events that don't have technology or an app, and I think that's going to change over the next several years for sure. And you'll find that, you know, technology, although not replacing human interactions, and that's the good news, again, I will stress that over and over, I do think there's some people that feel it's a lot easier for them to express something digitally in an app or social media or in the form of on the website, on the post or anything like this, than to express it in person. It's almost like, you know, the short impersonal text or message is much easier to craft and publish than expressing yourself at first. And so take advantage of that. Some people will thank you for that again, and they will welcome your first attempt to reach out and to be in touch with them. Now let's talk about the during, which is of course the biggest element of it, and I'll spend a few extra minutes on this one, because this is of course where everything starts. This is in fact where humans can take over, where technology can still be present and be helpful, but where there's a wonderful marriage of technology and human behaviors around what we do. And the interesting thing is also, you know, as I said early on, event organizers will really, really push and give you tools and ways for you to engage. They're told, and they've fully realized the impact that this can have, and also the data and the experience of engagement. And so as an overarching comment here, I would say that if you have anything like surveys and games and anything like this, take advantage of what the organizers will put in front of you, because this is designed to help you connect and network, and why not take advantage of what people are already doing for you. So again, I've already said this, and I will probably not say it again, but that's very, very critical. And all events, again, are not created equal. You'll have very, very poorly organized events, and you'll have beautiful events with a lot of new technologies and a lot of new systems to help you connect, but take advantage of them. Very, very important. Now, the impact of technology, also as an introductory comment to this slide, is that the impact of technology is very dependent on the type of events we've already talked about, you know, small, large, well-organized or not, and then also the type of attendees. You may find yourself that you're in a crowd that is not tech-savvy at all, or not interested in technology, and I go to a lot of those events where technology is, you know, third on their list of things to do, and they want to do it the old way. And I fully respect that, and in fact, it's not a criticism, but it's something you should know as you prepare yourself for that event, because if you put all your your investment on technology and hope that others will react that same way, you may be wrong. Others may still use the name tag and the business card as the main source of networking, and that's completely fine. But you just have to adjust your techniques and your tools, if you will, to the type of events and the type of attendees. That's also very important. So let's cover a few of the basics, and I'll go fast, I promise, on some of the obvious ones, because I think some of them will make you laugh as I go through, and you'll think more about some of the events that you've attended recently and how you behaved around this. But the name tag, I'm personally not a big fan. I think it's an old school way of doing it, old technology as I call it, but still very much needed, because in fact there's no other technology right now that will tell you exactly who's here. It's coming a little bit with some very micro geolocations where you can clearly identify where people are within a space, but frankly, we're years away, and we're not quite ready, I think, as attendees from a privacy standpoint to necessarily share. We in this country are already overshare, in my view, but you know, that's not going to be for right away. So the name tag is likely to stay. And you know, I see a lot of people at events that put the name tags in sometimes some very odd and awkward places, where looking at their names makes me uncomfortable, because I have to look at places on their body where I don't feel comfortable looking at. And so, stating the obvious, you just put that on your chest. You know, right side is better. It's always nice when people connect. That's directly where the eyes will go. And again, avoid and make it an easy process. When you meet people, interestingly enough, a lot of people ask me sometimes what I do, and I will gladly tell them after they've read my name. You know, hey Eric, how you doing? Good. Yeah. What do you do? Well, that's usually the first or second question. And although I'm prepared for that question, I think a lot of people would love to hear, and I'd love your thoughts on this, but I guarantee you that if you were to say, hey, what do you like to do? Everybody has a passion. Not everybody is a big fan, or not everybody is into their jobs. They're here sometimes because they have to be here. But if you connect at a more personal level with a situation or a passion, so what do you like to do as opposed to what do you do, is a very, very different and game changer in the first ice-breaking moment of the discussion. Another thing I've come to learn, and I do a poor job at it, but I'm working on it, is also remembering names. You will meet sometimes, depending again on the scale of the event, but you will meet people multiple times during the event. If it's a multiple day event or if it's a one night, it doesn't matter, but you will run again into people. If you remember faces and names, all of a sudden you've created for yourself a pool of potential safeties that you can go back to and say, hey John, how you doing? You know, yeah, we met earlier, and and that's it. That's kind of another point of reference. And that's also, will make this person feel very good, because they will just have met you, and all of a sudden you remember their names. They feel very important. They feel connected, and that's what you want. And that's how you build, this discussion. If you go back and run into someone and you kind of ignore or look down because you don't remember that name, you've lost an opportunity there. Business cards, there again. Yeah, go ahead,
Eric. I've been taking notes and agreeing with everything that you've said, so I'm uncharacteristically quiet during the session. But when you got to the names, that's when I think a lot of people maybe struggle, myself probably more so than others. So what are some tips that you found to help you remember names? And Jeff, you seem to do a pretty good job of this, so feel free to chime in. But any secrets or tips of ways to remember people's names when you get an opportunity to meet them, whether it's association, forcing yourself to say it again when you reintroduce yourself, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, anybody that's got ideas or suggestions, feel free to toss them in the chat box, because this is probably the biggest thing I would think that makes people uncomfortable at an event is you can't remember who the person is, so you avoid them because you don't want to be embarrassed. And at least that's typically the case it is for me.
It's a great point. It's a great question. I would say for me what has worked well is two things. One is association. So I try to identify a face with a color of a shirt or color of a tie or color of anything. Like I'm more like a visual guy. So color or anything meaningful on their face. Like short hair, long hair, bold, not bold. I mean, all type, blonde, brunette, or whatever it is that you can find and link association with a name. That's usually what I do. And then the other big thing that has been very helpful for me, especially when I go to events where we're involved as a technology or where other technologies might be involved, is that as soon as I've met someone, I will very quickly go into my app and identify that person if they're in the app. Hopefully they are. They may not be, but most likely they are. And I will very quickly identify and flag them as such that if I go back and I see them from afar, I very quickly go into my app, remember who they are, what their name is, what they've done in life, how we might be connected, and then I jump into that conversation. So I go into the discussion with an informed view of who they are and what their names are. Technology there can be extremely, extremely helpful.
Cool. Jeff, what about you? When you do a lot of conferences, you got any little things that have helped you along the way that you'd like to share?
Well, I'm thinking, and kind of laughing at the same time as well, because Eric Cook can work a conference better than anyone you've ever seen. The hard part of keeping up with Eric Cook is he runs into so many people to interact with. You find him all over the place.
It's the Red Bull IVs that I take before I show up that does it.
It's the nice guy syndrome, I think. That's what I call.
Well, you know, the name Eric does a lot for you. If I think you can agree, right, Eric?
Are you asking me? I would agree. Yes. I don't know if
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think that's probably the big one. Again, we'll keep an eye on the chat window if anybody's got a suggestion. But you know, I'm making a little bit more of an effort to repeat a name to try to make sure that I verbalize it. I think the association works. If you get into conversation and you can figure out, and then a lot of times I'll just come clean and say, you know, I'm really sorry. I've met a boatload of people today. Can you give me your name again? And I think people appreciate that. You can't do it like every single time you meet them, but you know, they know when you're faking it and trying to go, hey, you, what's up, dude? Yeah, so you want to be careful of that as well. So yeah.
No, being honest, I could not agree more. Is your best solution there. If you don't know someone, and if you really want to talk to someone because you've met them an hour before, just go for it and say, hey, yeah, I'm so sorry, I don't remember your name. And or you can actually look at it as you start approaching. You know, that's where name tags are good for.
Yep, exactly.
You know.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, keep them coming. That's good. Good point, Eric. And look, same concept. You know, business cards. I'm not a big fan, but we all carry business cards when we go to events. When we even not go to events. I mean, I always have cards on me, which is crazy for a tech guy. But you know, given all the current technologies, you would think business cards would be dying. But you know, guess what? They're still here, and they're here for a long time. I think people like to exchange. There's a physical contact and an action, which I think people really value. And frankly, they can be very helpful for your follow-ups, because if you start talking to someone, if you take some little notes behind the card, like we all do sometimes discreetly, I never do in front of someone because that makes it, you know, feel very creepy. But, you know, there's always a bit of a remembering game that goes on, which I do quite a bit. And I always try when I talk to someone, or when I collect a card, or when I talk to someone, one trick that has worked very, very well for me as part of my follow-up is to always try to come up. It's not easy, but try to come up with an action item. Try to come up with a to-do when you go back to your station a few days or a few weeks later, to send that article that you talked about, or send that little publication that you read because you talked about a specific topic. Or as you start sending your first email, and I encourage you to be the first one, by the way, being the first one makes a big difference. Always try to have an action such that someone can respond, thank you, or here's what I promised you, you know, and that will go a long way in the follow-up and making that person committed to responding to your email. We've talked a little bit about this in the early minutes of that discussion, but find a conference partner, a conference buddy, you know, like someone that you can tag along with. You know, it's a lot easier to walk the room and a lot easier to be with someone instead of being by yourself. And so that could be someone you met, you know, at coffee when you're waiting online. That could be someone you know, or someone you don't know really well, but someone you feel comfortable enough, you know, staying with a few, you know, for an hour or two with that person. That will make your life, you know, a lot easier, because again, 2 or 3 people, going back to my group comments, is safety, and we feel much safer. And those people, as they meet others, you get the benefit of it. So it's kind of, you know, that synergy effect of meeting new people thanks to that partner of yours that you've picked. And I always, you know, we talked about the exchange early on when we discussed the definition of networking. I'm a big fan in that case, whether it's your conference partner, whether it's people you meet, always will try to remember that networking goes both ways. I always encourage people, and I see so much of that, and I hate it. You have no idea, but I see so much of people that are just talking about themselves. They don't actually ask a single question. Ask questions. Be patient. Be attentive. You know, see what people have to say. You're going to learn a lot if you pay attention to what someone has to say. And please avoid the you know, the looking above, you know, above your shoulder and the screen. You know, the room screening aspect when you're talking to someone. Pay attention. That person feels very awkward when you're talking to them, but in fact, you're not really talking to them. And that's kind of the one thing that, as a human, I feel like if I connect with someone and if we really, really hit it off, it's like that conversation is going and we're paying attention to one another. And that's a very, very big element of it. So I'm sure others can comment on that, but, you know, we've seen it too many times, especially in networking sessions or cocktail hours. You know, that's the type of thing where people kind of look at the room and see if they find someone better to talk to. The other thing is, as I said, you know, if the organizers are actually organizing things for you, well, social activities are a wonderful way to connect. Much easier to meet people with a, you know, a glass of something in your hand than walking around like a very cold trade show floor. So again, remember that. And there's you know, friendly people like Eric Cook, for example. The fact that I hear that he's a great networker and a wonderful event goer doesn't surprise me, because nice people usually attract other people, and nice people that smile, that respond to your eye contact will really create, you know, the flow, and people will naturally come to you. So it's always very nice. You know, if you're looking down or if you're looking angry, that's not going to attract a lot of people to come to you. And making the first move is one that we talk a lot about. Being shy or being is not easy at all, but I've come to realize that when I go to someone to talk about something, those people are usually pretty happy I did so, because making the first move make their life easier. And so they're thankful for this. Remember, they go to events to network and meet people. They're in the same position you are in. So if you come in and if someone comes to me, I'm thankful. I'm like, oh, you came, you did the first step. I thank you for that. And that's something that always we should all keep in mind. Everybody is on the same page. You know, you have a few very, very super social people, but that's the exception. For the most part, we're not. Games, team building exercise, anything that you can find yourself in or involved in, please do. Games could be, you know, gamification is a big trend right now at events where, you know, you have leaderboards, you have ways to team up with people you don't know, and that's a wonderful way, of course, to make connections. There's networking areas sometimes and networking breaks. I find that sometimes people don't go to those sessions or those breaks because they find that it's an awkward moment and they're going to have to talk to people. Well, that's exactly the opposite. That's the point. The organizer went out of their way. The organizers, went out of their way to create some breaks in those very heavy educational sessions to give you opportunity to mingle and chat. And people that go to those sessions or go to those areas that are dedicated to that are here for the same exact reason that you are. They're here to meet people because they're told that it's a great environment for that. So arrive early and start chatting with people. That's, again, people will thank you for that. I went to...
Hey, Eric.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to do a quick time check. I know we kind of got off track a little bit with some questions there, but we've got 10 minutes remaining before we get to the top of the hour. Time typically flies by, and before we know it, the hour's up. So I know we've only got a couple more slides left, but I just don't want you to run out of time.
No, I appreciate the time check. I'm not actually looking at a clock, so that's very helpful. Thank you. I'll go very fast on the end of things here, but very quickly, I went to an event recently that was a wonderful success, and one thing that was great is the seating rotation. You know, you're sitting at a dinner, you're stuck with your neighbors, but then after every course, there would be a rotation where, you know, one time the male would move to a different table, and then the second time the woman would move to a different table. All sorts of little tricks here and there. And even if the organizer is not doing it, please always remember to do it. Rotation is a very, very nice way to do things that way. Let me switch, you know, given the time here, to more of some of the tools that are not necessarily ones that we control as humans, but one that we can leverage from technology. Social media is very helpful before and after an event, but can still be helpful during the event itself, whether it's a hashtag, whether it's your Twitter feeds that you're watching or anything like this. And I know I've met people through Twitter which is amazing and remarkable given the scale of that tool. But again, it's very, very much possible. And event networking apps in that case, of course, can play a big role. There's a lot of technologies out there that not only will give you the content of the event, as I said, the agenda, the speakers, and everything else, but will also identify who are the other attendees in this room. They will even show you how you're connected to them through your own networks, cross-referencing your LinkedIn networks, for example, and see the overlaps. They will identify the connectors that you share with those people. Are you from the same country? Are you from the same hometown? All those things that will really identify and break the ice for you. And then, depending on the event, again, if the event is small scale, you can find those people in the room and you can chat, but at least you're informed and you have the information you need before walking in. So it's like bringing your own LinkedIn, supercharged LinkedIn on steroids, going to an event in your hands on your mobile device, and all of a sudden you make informed decisions about the people you want to see and people you want to talk to. And guess what? There's even pushing the envelope, those chats, in those networking apps that are really there for you to break the ice and interact, publicly or privately, depending on the scale of the event, such that you can break the ice first in the app before you connect physically. And we like that, and we feel that it's safe and it's encouraging. And then there's a lot of other technologies. We talked a little bit about geolocation early on, with beacons. There's the NFC, the RFID. It's all those technologies that are basically bringing the expertise of a personalized experience within the walls of an event. So depending on your location, depending on where you are in that space, especially for the bigger venues that work very well, you get specific content or you get some very specific, networking experience. I think a lot of those tools are wonderful, and we know in work and traffic and a lot of them, but, we're years away from really broad stream, usage of them. I think event apps are here and they're here today. I think the geolocation, the NFC, and the RFID are available and useful, in the form of bracelets or in the form of necklace. I mean, there's a lot of things that people are looking at in terms of optimizing the networking. But I think for now, keep that in the back of your mind, but it's not something that I would necessarily spend a ton of time on. And I don't think they'll replace the combination of technology and human behaviors around networking. So the one thing that's interesting, and the final thing I would say on this slide, is that despite all those techniques and technologies and everything that we do to improve our networking, what we find is that networking is still left up to chance, right? I mean, you meet people based on who you are, where you are, and it's basically you're waiting online for coffee and you connect and you start chatting with the person behind you. Well, that's luck. Luck dictates who you're going to see and who you're going to talk to, and I think where technology can play a big role, like an event app, for example, social media a bit less, but an event app can help and bring and engineer that luck. And so in a way, you're informed, but you're also going in a direction that you want to go into, as opposed to letting, random people talk to you. So if you're looking for a marketing profile because you're hiring someone right now, you can actually filter and identify people you may care about that fit that profile, such that you're not, overwhelmed with all the information and all the people that are not relevant to you at that moment. So again, more to come on that. And then the final one here is really the after, and that will go very fast, Eric, in the spirit of it, and I am not watching the time. This is more like in terms of your follow-up. The technology will come back and be key in the way you do this, because of course we're no longer in the same room. It's very important to be the first one to follow up. This is where business cards and technologies like tools like Evernote and others that are really storing your information and making it very easy to access and use will be key. Collecting business cards and is no longer something I would recommend. I think you need to scan them. You need to have them automatically plugged into your information hub. You also need to have your notes, because the information you collect on site is very precious. This is this context around the people and who they are and why they're interesting to you, and it would be a shame to lose that information. And this is, again, where social media and I think event networking apps can play a big role, because guess what? The right apps can also be creating a new channel for you. If you've met with people physically or in the app, for example, on an event, the app should be that new channel where you can interact and go back to the profile of those people at any given time, months before, after an event. And if you see those people again at another event, well, that technology can help you retrieve that information and make sure that you're not flying blind when you go and talk to that person. And Eric, to the point you made earlier about remembering names, 6 months from now, you might not remember a name, but if it's that person is in your app and can tell you the profile and can tell you that you've met 6 months ago, well, that is an amazing tool and amazing information that will serve you very well for that networking. So it's all about follow-up. storing and organizing the information in a very, very simple and efficient way, and making sure that you can stay active and keep the dialogue going. You've done all that work and you've invested all that time and dollars to go to that event. It would be a shame not to leverage the techniques and the tools at your disposal to really follow up and act on your discussions. I find too many people that are going to events, and once the event is over, the event is over. To me, the event is a starting point to a dialogue and relationship. It's the other way around, and I think that's the way you should think about it when you go into your events and when you come back out of it. I'll pause there. I know we have a few more minutes, but I'll just pause there for 2 seconds if there's any questions. Otherwise, my key takeaways are pretty obvious, and I'll leave them on the screen. But they don't really need the voiceover on that. So Eric, take it over.
Cool. In LinkedIn in particular, I've noticed, because I've got my address book synchronized with LinkedIn, and it's pulling in some of my notes through Google Apps for Business, and I see that there's an option to be able to also tie other connections within your LinkedIn notes, even on the free account, as far as who introduced you. I know I met a few people at a conference recently when I was with Jeff, and they sent me a LinkedIn invitation, and I was able to go in and actually tag Jeff as a introducer to me to the bankers that are currently clients of his. So when I go back into LinkedIn, I can be able to see that information. And that also kind of helps jog the memory, because then you've got some sort of a spatial reference to say, oh yeah, I remember meeting her. It was with Jeff. We were at the table. We laughed a lot, had a couple drinks, so that kind of gives you that nudge to your memory to put it into order. But yeah, definitely taking notes and documenting stuff like that, that's pretty good. So. Cool.
Yeah, no, and tools like this, like follow-ups to me is key, and I'm doing a much better job than I was many years ago on this. But for example, tools like I'm a Gmail user for work, and I would tell what has saved my life recently is Boomerang. If you don't know Boomerang, take a look at it. It's a wonderful tool that will remind people if somebody has responded to your email over a period of time, the email comes back in your inbox for follow-up again, so you can ping them again and ask if, hey, any thoughts on this? I mean, this has been a lifesaver for staying organized and focused on the goal here. And I think, it's, and I'm sure there are others, by the way, but this is one that I've loved recently.
Yeah, I would agree. So, Jeff, I figured you would get a kick out of the collar of shame on this little cartoon, being that we're both dog people, and I know each of our dogs have experienced the collar of shame at one point in time in their lives. So. I haven't gone to this extent where I've worn one to keep me from looking at my phone, but I think my dogs can relate to this if they could see it. It's pretty funny.
I think it's about 150 times a day, right? Isn't it? Statistics.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would need a clear dog collar
of shame to a party.
That's my next Halloween costume right there.
There you go. I like it. Invite me to the party.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to make a note of before we finished, because I know I reached out to a few of the conference organizers that I work with, and I know we've got some event organizers that are on here. This certainly was a webinar to talk about the whole concept of leveraging technology to make networking better. What Eric and I are going to do at some point down the road is we're going to have a more focused, it'll be admittedly a product demo on the Topi platform. It'll give me an opportunity to share some real-world experience with one of my clients, because, like I said, they're actually using it right now at their event up north. But we're going to set up a demo for that. So I suspect that's going to happen within the next probably 2 to 3 weeks. If you are interested in participating in that demo, send me an email, or if you would like a demo prior to that, you can go ahead, and there's Eric's contact information. You can get directly in touch with Eric and just say that you heard it on Free Webinar Wednesdays, and if I can hop on, that'd be even better. But if you'd like to see the actual Topi demo, certainly encourage you to check it out, because it is a pretty slick platform, and Eric was very modest and didn't really talk a lot about the app, but it is very cool, and it's got some pretty unique advantages to it when it comes specifically to networking and putting people together, and not being just a one-hit wonder like a lot of the apps that I've used at conferences. When the conference is over, you delete the app, and all that information goes away because it's useless, and you don't use it anymore. And Topi's got a different approach to that, which I think is really cool. So before people dropped off, I just wanted to make sure that you knew that, and we're looking forward to doing a little bit more deep dive into Topi and showing how people can set up an event and create agenda items and speaker infos and conference slides and all sorts of other cool stuff. So so that'll be good. So that,
thank you.
I think that's, yeah, so some great information, some good thoughts. I'm going to be at a conference next week down south, and so I will put some of these ideas to work, which also kind of causes me to remember we are going to not have a show. Free Webinar Wednesdays will not be live next week because we'll be out and about, but we'll be back, and just keep an eye on the website and our Facebook page for announcements of when we're going to get back. We've got a little bit of travel coming up. So let me see. Jeff, I see that there's a couple questions in there.
I think you covered them. They're primarily related to Eric's app.
Cool. Okay. So yeah, get a hold of Eric, and if you want to see the app now, or just let me know and Jeff know, and then when we get ready to do a more full-blown demo, we'll certainly invite you, and we'll get people to hop on. So with that,
Eric,
I think we are done.
Somebody typed in the question box they want to see a demo. Can you give them your email address so they can email you directly to get included in the demo?
Sure. And if you want to just, actually, Eric's is on there. If you want to just email him and say Free Webinar Wednesdays, Eric and I communicate quite a bit because we've got this app going on right now, and Eric will keep me in the loop, and we can go ahead and schedule something.
Perfect.
So, perfect.
That's great.
Good. Well, thanks.
Well, thank you again,
Eric
for
from Topi.
Thank you.
Said
Thank you
Eric
both,
from WSI, and Jeff. I might be seeing you in a couple weeks. You never know. Cross your fingers.
Sounds good. Twice in less than 6 months.
I know. It'll be crazy. So anyway, but thanks everyone for joining us, and we won't be here next week, but we'll be back shortly, and until then, keep an eye on the website and updates, and we'll get this recording out there here very soon, and we'll see you at freewebinarwednesdays.com. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.